Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 629, A Perfect Fit. For Monday, March 22nd, 2021. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. As we continue to debate the future of online tracking and targeted advertising, comes news that TikTok will now offer new personalized ad units, leading some to wonder whether tracking and targeting can ever be squashed online. So tonight, we'll discuss. Also, whether the Ad Council's vaccine effort is enough, brands as media companies gets a new life, Snap's new acquisition, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the Director of Content for Foundation Marketing, Ms. Melanie Deziel. Melanie, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat tonight.
Yeah, so am I. Also with us, we welcome back the showrunner and host of Corona TV, author, speaker, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Joe, what's going on?
Well, I became a showrunner, which is awesome, so I'm excited.
Showrunner is just a name for executive producer, but we'll go with it. And finally, he's the vice president and analyst for customer experience at Gartner. We say hello to Mr. Augie Ray. Hi, Augie.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Now, we're going to start off with a topic that we've been covering over and over and over again, but there's constantly new angles to pull in on this story. Once again, we're talking about the future of personalized digital advertising. Now, in the midst of Google ending the cookie chatter and brands coming to terms with Apple's move to curb uninformed use of IDFA tracking, comes word that TikTok will be that TikTok will be changing its user agreement to allow for personalized ads with no means of opting out. Now, Augie, despite the conventional wisdom that advertisers need to get back to basics and forgo use of narrowly targeted programmatic advertising, does TikTok's move portend a different future? Is this a sign that we'll never get rid of any kind of personalized advertising, tracking, all that stuff that makes advertising so wonderful and so awful at the same time?
Well, it's funny you talk about how much we've talked about it on the show as both a listener and someone who's been on. When this came up again, one of the things that I realized was that I've always been listening to people talk about advertising on the show, and I have thought of it as the game after analysis that a post-game analysis you'd have on ESPN. But I'm beginning to realize that this conversation is like the play-by-play because things just are happening all the time. It's not like a game has been won. And in fact, if I were to characterize what TikTok did here as a play, this was a 1-yard gain for the walled gardens. So the thing that I think is interesting is that I don't think this is very interesting, in fact. And what I mean by that is that TikTok is really doing what all the other walled gardens are doing. Snapchat, Facebook, and Twitter have essentially the same policy where you can't opt out of tracking from the activities you do within their application. So I don't think this is a big strike one way or another. It just goes to show the importance of having your own application and being able to control your own environment a little bit. The thing that I always think is interesting is the evergreen conversation of how much consumers or users will actually care. And I suspect TikTokers will click right past that privacy alert like everyone else does. And so I don't think anything changes here. We've got, if I'm going to kill this metaphor, Bob, we've got refs, which are Google and Apple. We've got the teams, which are Facebook, TikTok, and Snapchat. Then we've got the players, which are the advertisers. And in the end, the game is still the game. It's still being played pretty much exactly as it has been. And until the fans in the stands do something different, start not just cheering or booing, but whether they keep buying tickets and tuning in to watch the games. I just think it's going to continue to be this back and forth little battle.
And the Hail Mary is advertising as a viable business model. That was a layup. I just mixed sporting metaphors.
Thank you, Joseph.
One of the things that's interesting about this conversation and having it so often is that I get different takes from different audiences. Like we just talked about this subject, another angle of this subject last week, and there was a big movement among the conversation toward getting back to basics with advertising. That somehow we need to be willing to forgo the programmatic universe and start to look at advertising in a much more holistic way like we used to. And Melanie, I'm wondering, which is the future? Do you agree with Augie's take that nobody's going to care and that everybody's going to click past the box and everybody's going to continue to be targeted and tracked like usual? Or is this really a chance for marketers to step up to the plate and get back to basics in terms of targeting and messaging on their ad campaigns?
I think it could be a little bit of both, to be honest. I totally agree with Augie that the TikTok audience, especially being that they are young and have been raised and indoctrinated to not believe, they've never had privacy online. They've always been tracked and targeted to. So I totally agree. They're going to click right through that and keep on, dancing and whatever else they do. But I do think, especially as a creative, I have seen a lot of folks resting on programmatic and the idea that we don't have to target our content. We don't have to make something truly compelling because we're just going to sort of spray and pray and hopefully it'll hit the right folks and land correctly. So I do like the idea of sort of raising the bar for ourselves by not relying on all of this so much and kind of getting back to, I don't want to say the Mad Men days. There were a lot of things wrong with those days, but just, the sort of the creative force being the driving force rather than the tech.
Joe, what's your opinion? I mean, that's just like, I know you have them because you're a very opinionated man, but that's beside the point. I mean, what do you think between the two angles on this story? Which is the future? And is it going to be a blend or is it going to be falling squarely on one side of the fence or another?
I'm just trying to figure out if I'm going to actually answer your question because you said, what's your opinion? Because I know you have opinions because you're an opinionated man. I'm like, and now you want me to tell you what I think? I'm just going to, no.
Oh, come on, Joe. You know that you're an opinionated guy, and that's why I bring you on the program. Give me a break.
Only on the show.
Oh, yeah.
On Corona TV, I leave it up to my guests to be opinionated. You know what? I think I might be a little contrarian to my normal contrarianism tonight. And I kind of I'm siding a little bit more with Melanie than Augie. And Augie, the only reason is that I actually think people do care and they're starting to care a lot more and they're starting to get a lot more aware, especially in this day and age where cancel culture looms large. I just think that that people are just becoming a little bit more awake or to what's going on around them. That said, the question that you asked, I actually think that the one thing about TikTok, kudos to them, the quality of creative is significantly higher on TikTok compared to other social media platforms. And I feel whether that's because of TikTok, whether we credit TikTok or we credit the advertisers, I think that they're working a little bit harder and they really are creating the types of units or messaging or just concepts that the audience are going to lean in towards and embrace. And I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing. And, with better targeting or self-targeting, or in this case, mandatory permission, which is, of course, an oxymoron. But I do think creative might actually save the day here for the platform, for the advertisers, and quite frankly, for the users, because they'll continue to get, free sea shanties to their heart's content.
I do think what's interesting, and I've talked about this with a lot of other, creatives and marketers alike, I feel like the main, the quality of creative on TikTok is great. It's very easy to hop onto trends, but a big part of what makes it so appealing is their algorithm is so dang good. And I'm sure that that's coming from the amount of tracking that's happening. But, I get content that is truly relevant to me, and that's part of the appeal. And so that's, it is kind of a double-edged sword, I think.
It's interesting.
Go ahead, Augie.
Because I am still not sure that people care. Like, for all the buzz, we've heard kind of contrarian thoughts here in that Joe said people care more, and Melanie said that the TikTok generation doesn't care because they have never known what privacy is. The thing that I actually think is interesting, however, that could change this and could maybe influence my opinion to be a little bit more on the side of that maybe we will see a privacy concern rising, is that previously everything has pretty much been done click through, right? Terms and conditions, nobody reads them, they click it, they want to get to their content. What I think is interesting is that the approach that Google and Apple are taking is beginning to give people choice, right? Do you want this or that? And I think that when presented with a choice, lots of people are simply going to say, I don't want tracking because it sounds creepy. But all that being said, I do want to come in. I'm an analyst. I have to share a little bit of data. I have a Twitter friend, John Costier. You all may know him. He posted a blog post on the Singular site last year that talked about the number of people in the U.S. who have switched off ad tracking on either the iPhone or on Android. And what was interesting is that over the course of 4 years, the number of people who had switched off ad tracking on iPhone had doubled. But in the same 4 years had shrunk by a factor of 6 on Android. And I don't think that means that iPhone users care and Android users don't, but I think that as the tech giants change the way we go about thinking about this and offering not just an accepting button, but an either or choice, that could in fact have some impact. And so maybe next year I will join Joe in saying that all of this is beginning to gain some traction and have an impact.
In some ways,
I do think there's a subset of folks who definitely care. Those are the same folks who are, off of Facebook on principle. I think the conversations that have happened in recent years around Cambridge Analytica and the like have kind of opened some folks' eyes to the degree of tracking. And those folks who are, never Facebook or, not using any Facebook products or, whatever else, those will be the same folks who care, but they're probably not using TikTok for those concerns in the first place,
One of the things, I love this conversation about the consumer and about what they're going to gravitate toward in this whole argument. And what's interesting to me, though, is that it's not really an argument between being tracked and not being tracked. It's an argument between whether or not you believe that the big tech companies like Apple and Google, who are shutting down the tracking via their platforms, are really doing something altruistic for the consumer, or just trying to make other big tech companies sweat a little bit and maybe consolidate their own power. What do you guys think about that? It's just like, is this really a choice between tracking and not tracking, or is it just a movement toward walled gardens and everybody kind of hunkering down and camping on their own territory to make sure that they can make the most possible money?
I think
I'm inclined to believe the second.
I've got a kind of a slight a different answer, like almost on a parallel path, which is, I think these platforms have got a bigger narrative behind them, and right now, you've got Mark Zuckerberg, who is quickly becoming Dr. Evil himself. Personified, the personification of evil, and they're representing the platform, and people are saying, I'm done, I'm out of there. And it's funny because in contrast, you've got TikTok allegedly representing Team China virus, right? And turning out actually not really as as evil as might have been portrayed. And I just think it's interesting because people vote, it used to be that they would vote with their dollars. Now they absolutely are voting with their time and their clicks. And, from a consumer-centric standpoint, from a brand-centric standpoint, what do brands care about? Well, brands certainly care about privacy, no doubt. I think consumers might at some point care a little bit about the narrative behind, the people behind the curtain. We're talking about walled gardens, but maybe there are curtains that you have to open and shut in order to view the garden, depending on whether you're on the inside or outside. And I just think it's interesting. I mean, I don't know where I kind of fall on that discussion, but I do think that the tide appears to be turning against Facebook. And I don't think TikTok necessarily, from a PR standpoint, has had a bad run of late. I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are.
I think the key word in what you said is appears to. That's one of the things I've been thinking about. I think these giants especially are, along with some other big names, in danger of being accused of monopolies, right? And this is something that they obviously don't want. And so I think this kind of regulation almost gives the appearance that they care and that they're doing something about it, especially because we know, just if you watched, 5 minutes of any of Zuckerberg's congressional testimonies, that our lawmakers don't understand any of this well enough to really enact any regulation. I mean, it was like painful listening to the kind of questions that they were asking him just about like how basic parts of the internet function. So I think this is, sort of to give the appearance that, well, we know we're self-regulating, we're going to be the gatekeepers. But again, that is now in their control instead of, maybe we'll stave off government intervention for a bit.
Well, it's a fascinating subject, and I know we're going to be back to it, but let's just move on to another topic.
More play-by-play in the future?
Yeah, more play-by-play. There will be constant play-by-play as we go through this. Well, next up, I wanted to talk about the Ad Council's push toward vaccine awareness for the COVID-19 vaccines. At 52 million, the current Ad Council campaign encouraging COVID vaccination in the U.S. is the biggest campaign in the history of the nonprofit. And to its credit, it's largely supported by brand donations of both money and ad inventory, something that we talked about on this show early on before it even became a reality. So my question, Joe, is it nearly enough? I mean, 52 million sounds like a lot of money, but when we're talking about the coronavirus and the impact it's had on society and the amount of money it's going to take to get out the word that this vaccine is safe and that you need to do it, it doesn't seem like 52 million is a whole lot. It seems like it's a rounding error.
Yeah, I was on the show a while back when we actually discussed this for the first time, and I was disgusted in terms of how low that number was. I mean, it's kind of a rounding error when you look at total ad spend. And I mean, when it costs, I don't even know what the most recent cost is of a Super Bowl commercial. By the way, why were we not, can you imagine, by the way, if every single ad on the Super Bowl had been focused on the vaccine? Can you imagine how powerful that would have been?
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like the folks who are skeptical about the vaccine don't strike me as the kind of folks who are going to be convinced by something they perceve to be mainstream media.
This would have, I'm just saying, when you think about the money spent, all right? So my first response to this is 52 million or whatever it is just does not sound like a lot and enough, in the grander scheme of things. And I was just talking about if the media is the message, and, as a strategist and someone who's worked in it before, that would have been game changing. What's happening right now seems like just a drop in the ocean. Now, secondly, the tagline from what I'm seeing is "It's up to you," and that sounds like Ron DeSantis. That sounds like Ron DeSantis's re-election slogan. I mean, it may work in Florida, but it's not going to work. That is so weak and disappointing. But my third point is actually closer to what Melanie was saying, is at the end of the day, At the end of the day, and I'm almost reversing my position to a degree, which is you just need more celebrities and more influencers, and people that the 32% of the population right now that are inclined to not have the vaccine, you need to just connect with the people that they trust and respect. And at the top of the list is former President Donald Trump, who did come out and say something in favor of getting a vaccine. That's what we need, actually. What we need are more of those endorsers and less advertising that comes up with it's up to you.
I don't know that I necessarily agree with everybody's take on the fact that people who are prone to be skeptical of this are really not going to be able to hear the message. I kind of feel like when you look at the stats from what I can see early on in the election and the post-election and all the presidential polling and everything else that goes on, it really came down to about a core audience of around 30 to 32% of people who are diehard Trump supporters. And out of that, you got a smaller subset of people who are, completely anti-mask, anti-vaccine, anti-anything that's establishment. So, I know the country is divided, but overall, I get this sense that more and more people are feeling better about the vaccine, but there's still some holdouts who can be convinced. And I feel like, you might have, I'm pulling these stats out my butt right now, but, if you've got 50% of the audience or population willing to get a vaccine, and you've got another 30% of them who are, just on the fence and need to be convinced, that seems worthwhile putting $1 billion against it to make sure that everybody gets the vaccine. Am I wrong? It's just like, it seems like advertising and messaging is going to be super important to this process to make sure that people are aware of the vaccine's safety and efficacy and that they need to go get it right away.
I'm not sure advertising is really the answer, though, to be perfectly honest here.
Agreed.
This is, I don't know if maybe your listeners don't know about COVID because, they've somehow missed it, or that vaccines are out there and that their friends are getting vaccinated, as is just flooding into social media in the last month. To me, this is a politicized issue, and I don't think snappy ads are going to change anything. I think what's going to change things is a lot of people being vaccinated and there being no, ill effects, which of course we're seeing.
Augie, it's like I give you a lot of credit for being up on the news. I'm up on the news as well. I'm a person who tries to stay informed, but most of the public is not informed. They don't know the news. They just know what their friends have told them. And those are the people who can be convinced if you get the right spokesperson saying the right thing at the right time. It can be really a powerful way to say, oh, maybe I should give this vaccine a second thought.
I'm just not as convinced. I think everyone's seeing their friends do it. I think you are onto something, though, Bob, in talking about the right spokesperson. I'm just not sure advertising might be the right medium, but, perhaps a little more PR. But promoting what Trump said, promoting what some of the conservative heroes, because, this does tend to sort of split down some partisan lines. But I think just more promotion of what some of the conservative leaders are saying. They're all getting the vaccines, of course. And I just think that's going to break people down. I'm still not convinced that advertising is going to be the thing that tips this. But, I could be wrong.
I would also like to see some of that money allocated to, kind of rebuilding trust, particularly within the Black community, because I think it's one of those things we're not talking as much about. But historically, this country has had a very poor relationship between the medical industry and the Black community. They've been treated very unfairly in a lot of testing, particularly early on. Even today, we see really disparate outcomes in, basic medical care for the Black community compared to people who are white. So I think skepticism in that community is valid because they have there's a very difficult past in the way that the Black community has been treated by the medical institution. So I think that there's some room there to try to repair some of that, again, maybe with the right spokespeople to make sure we're not leaving them out of the opportunity that the vaccine presents as well.
So if I disagree with Bob disagreeing with us, am I in fact agreeing with myself? I'm not sure, but
I'd expect that from somebody so opinionated, Joe.
I mean, I disagree with you. No, I mean, first of all, let's just acknowledge what Melanie just said, which is vital, because we're making a huge assumption and a mistake if we just think it's about, ruby red states and Donald Trump supporters. It isn't. And from a targeting standpoint, we're absolutely talking about predominantly, the African American community, as well as, I mean, there are many, right? There's anti-vaxxers, and there's also, diehard and let's just say duped, maybe, Donald Trump supporters. However, advertising in this particular case has a role to play. And if we combine those two worlds, right, not just influencer or celebrity endorsements, but the ability to see people, just like we've seen, Michelle Obama and Barack Obama and former presidents, not only showing, I want to say not only, showing themselves getting vaccinated. Advertising does have a role to play in terms of amplifying that message.
Yes.
But this is not persuading through messaging and creative. Just show the damn people that they trust getting vaccinated. Period.
Yeah.
The end.
I think there's also something. I mean, I know that we're all here. We're all media folks. Like, we believe in advertising. We believe in marketing in the media. But I've also, seen firsthand, my grandmother, for example, doesn't use the internet. She doesn't have a computer, and she's definitely not alone, right? The disparity of access to the internet, access to computers came up when we all first started homeschooling and working from home. And so that's something that I think about too, is who's the audience that we're going to miss because they're not seeing some of this content, because they're, frontline workers that aren't watching TV at the end of the day, or they're, on Zoom all day doing school or work from home, or they don't have access to the internet at all. So I know that folks are being unable to get their reservations for a vaccine appointment, even if they are eligible, because they just don't have access to the tools needed to do it. So that's something that, maybe some of this budget can go to help as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Ad Council needs to think about this in a three-dimensional way. I mean, you guys are making a great case for an integrated marketing campaign. That doesn't necessarily mean just running 30-second or 15-second ads on television or putting digital ads onto Facebook. I mean, this is also about getting into the streets and making sure that people are aware of things, and taking those influencers and putting them in ads and kind of reaching a whole new audience that isn't paying attention to the news. I think that all these factors need to be put in play, but it just makes a case for $52 million is not enough to do any of that. I mean, it's enough to maybe run a couple solid TV campaigns, and that's about it. You're not really going to get much beyond when you're talking about $52 million. Am I wrong?
I just think that we got to see what happens, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I like your point. I mean, as you know, I've posted a lot about COVID over this past year. I was an early person tracking it and warning people, and suffered the slings and arrows of people calling me panicky back in last January even. So, I get the concern. I like what you're talking about, but I got to tell you, we talk about people who don't pay attention to the news, but everyone's tuned in to social media at some form or another. And I mean, it seems like every fourth post is somebody talking about that they got the vaccine. And I think friends are going to have an influence on friends. I also think, by the way, there's been some interesting reports that the way that we've been doing it so far is not conducive or doesn't invite, for instance, the Black community and other disenfranchised communities, because they don't make appointments. They don't have the kind of life that allows them to just drop things at some future point. And what's interesting is that there's been some early data that suggests that when states or cities go to simply having walk-ins, that those underserved communities actually show up more, which is just my way of saying this is an incredibly complex topic. And I think 52 million might be a decent start, and let's see where we get, because by the time that 52 million is spent, it may be that every American knows people who've been vaccinated. They're getting social pressure to do it. The press is sharing some of the photos of the people who've gotten vaccinated in the way you're talking about. I'm not sure that more needs to be committed right now, but I sure hope that there is deeper pockets if we need them.
Well said.
I think those are great points. I want to add just two more, which is one of the things that's not helping is the fact that there is just, it's following on from what Augie was saying, just tremendous inconsistency from not only between states, but sometimes within the same state, and it's confusing, and that's one of the failings of the one size fits all advertising approach, unless it can be localized and regionalized, and let's just hope it is. Because of that confusion. I know in Connecticut, for example, 16-year-olds and older will be able to get the vaccine in the next, be able to apply for the vaccine in the next month or so. And then you've got just people that are just still housebound and quarantined, in California that are completely at the other end of the spectrum. The other point I just wanted to add is sometimes, to the point where it's not that advertising is the answer, isn't the answer, but we haven't really spoken about courage and spine and backbone, and that can operate at a brand level by brands saying, no vaccine, no play, right? Can you imagine if like the NFL was basically to say, because it's going to operate on two levels. One is at a brand or corporate level, privatized, and one is at a federal level. But at some point, the ability to say, if you don't have a vaccine, you don't get to attend a public school for free. Or if you don't have a vaccine, you don't get to fly. Or if you don't have a vaccine, you don't get to go and watch, the next football game. There are some things, I know that opens up a massive Pandora's box. And I'm not necessarily saying I'm advocating in favor against, civil liberties, blah, blah, blah. I'm just talking about what it takes to get to herd immunity and to reopen our economy and get back to some degree of new normal, and to leave this on the shoulders of poor beleaguered advertising seems like, to use a nice sporting analogy, a Hail Mary.
Well, speaking of one size fits all, for a while, not too long ago, everyone in marketing used the Red Bull. Oh, sorry, I'm like going to the wrong topic with the wrong. I had a perfect segue for the wrong topic. Let's try this again. For a while, not too long ago, everyone in marketing used the Red Bull example as a rallying cry for why every brand would and should become their own media company. Now, the Jets cooled on this over time, but as the pandemic drags on, more and more brands are turning to the creation of original content as a way to reach their audience. Most notably, recently, Budweiser just started a show called, I think, This Is Not a Sports Show or something like that, and it's a YouTube show, a video show that allows them to interview famous sports heroes without necessarily focusing entirely on sports. Melanie, is this fire really lighting up again? Are brands starting to think that they can become media companies and that every brand should be a media company? Or is this just an immediate tactic to address the current circumstances that brands find themselves in? What do you think's going on here?
I'll be honest, I don't have enough data to say one way or the other, like whether it's increasing. I think my guess is that what happened is, especially, a year ago or so in March, when everything got real serious real quick, I think a lot of us in the marketing space kind of had to take a step back and realize that a lot of the channels that we were sort of resting on, our out of home or, some of the other things that we were just relying on, we needed to be a little more intentional. We needed to change our approach. We needed to change the tactics that we were using. And I think that emphasized for a lot of people the importance on owning your platform, that, you need to be able to bring people back to you when you can't get to them yourself. And so I know we did see a slight rise in direct mail, which is, not something we typically see much uptick in these days. But, I think it kind of forced people to explore different tactics. And maybe that was a moment of, all right, well, everybody's been saying we need to have a blog, we need to have a show, we need to have a YouTube series. Now's the time. We're all stuck at home, and now we've all got, video recording equipment and audio recording equipment, for the most part at our fingertips at home. So I think it just kind of, it made it easier for folks to try those things if they hadn't already. And it also made it easier for those folks who were already doing some of that to kind of ramp it up a bit, given that some of their other, the other tools in their tool belt were taken away.
It's rare that I get to talk about a subject with a person who is actually an expert on that subject. I mean, most of the times I'm just going through the headlines and culling stories, and everybody has an opinion. But you really are an expert in content marketing in particular. What do you think about the future of content marketing? Is it going to be, I mean, it's obviously an important part of the marketing puzzle, but is it going to be as dominant as we once thought it would be? I mean, it's just like, I'm just talking about personal feelings. Do you feel like it's going to become something like what we've been promised all along, that every brand needs to be a media company?
Well, in general, I'm pretty hesitant to make predictions because, every prediction made before January 2020, 2020 was pretty far off at that point. But what I can say is that based on the trends that we are seeing, I don't think it's going anywhere. But I also don't think it's the silver bullet that a lot of people thought it was. I know, I mean, obviously, like you said, I'm a big champion of it. I believe it, but I've also never advocated that you should take all your budget from everything else and put it into content marketing. Content marketing serves a very specific purpose in that it's really helpful for attracting attention, for engaging an audience, for retaining and retargeting an audience. But it's not typically direct response. So, if you have a direct response need, it's not the answer. So, I mean, what we have seen is early in the pandemic, we did see an increase in search for, process-focused content specifically, how-to, recipes, DIY, instructions, things like that. I think we, for the most part, that has continued. So I think we'll still continue to see a lot of brands creating that type of content to capitalize on that search traffic. And I think we've also seen a tremendous increase, obviously, in comfort and willingness to engage with live video and video content. So I think those things will probably stick around for a bit, so long as they continue to work well. But yeah, I don't think content marketing is going anywhere. I think, like I said, if anything, as we look at the way some of these platforms and gatekeepers are changing their rules, the importance of having your own platform and owning your audience is only going to be, even more top of mind.
Hey, Augie, what are your thoughts here? I mean, I know that you're no fan of advertising. You're much more about the way that we create a customer experience that's going to be meaningful and memorable to the consumer, and that's not always through an ad. What role does content play in the future of marketing in your eyes?
Yeah, I'm a little contrarian on all this. To be perfectly honest, I don't even really love the term content marketing. Content is something that fuels the rust of marketing, right? Advertising is content, PR is content, social media is content. I sometimes think that we'd be better off to talk about content strategy rather than content marketing, and maybe I'm splitting hairs a little too much. But at the end of the day, like every time I hear this talk about brands as publishers, I think about all the publishers that are failing. It's not like publishing has proven to be a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And so sometimes when I've spoken about this, I've used a Venn diagram that I think sometimes resonates with people. They may disagree or agree. I'm happy to have anyone on this call certainly, pick a fight about it. But one side of this Venn diagram is content that people will read, and the other side is content that will help your brand. And so what we often see is brands that are offering content that nobody wants to read because it's too brand centric. Yep. On the other hand, you get brands, and we saw this in the early days of the social media era quite a bit, where brands would post things that did nothing for the brand at all. It was like, click like if you're glad it's Friday, and it would make your engagement metrics go up, but it didn't make anyone think differently about your brand, right? And so if there can be a Venn diagram between content that helps your brand and content that people actually want to read, then I think you've got a content strategy, or content marketing, if you prefer, opportunity. And so when you say Bud does this, well, Bud's big into sports. They've got sponsorships. People love sports. It's a good overlap. Every time people talk about this, though, we think about Red Bull, we think about Bud, we think about Coca-Cola, and I think about toothbrush. I think about soap. I think about like the 98% of products where nobody's going, man, I really want, my toothpaste company to become a brand publisher. So anyways, I just think that we've got to put it into perspective. Some brands can be publishers, but I think that's the exception and not the rule. And for the rest, content is important, but content is the pipes and not the strategy per se.
So I was totally with you and nodding and ready to totally agree until until you said content isn't for everybody. So I think I agree with you that it's become a bit of a buzzword.
Wait, just in case I misspoke, publishing's not for everybody. Every brand needs content. So,
but I guess when you say publishing, what do you mean? Because if they have content, they've published it, right?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you start talking about brands as publishers, to me, that's a media play. That's a big thing, right? I mean, every brand's got TikTok, every brand's got YouTube. So yes, I guess they're all publishing. But When I hear brands as publishers, I think of a very significant media-like play, which we have occasionally seen work for travel companies, for instance, or beer companies, right? So but maybe I'm drawing a distinction that's not there. Please continue.
I mean, I think where I see it a little bit differently is that, that Venn diagram you talked about, the really good thing is that the only content that works is the stuff that's in the middle, that's in that overlap. So any of the other stuff, while it's certainly out there, there's bad everything, no doubt. Anyone who does content with any level of commitment is going to very quickly find that the stuff in the middle is what works. So that's what we tend to see, in the long haul, as anyone's doing any sort of learning and not wanting to waste budget, is we do see them gravitate very much toward that middle of content that appeals to the audience and provides value and in some way supports the brand message. And oftentimes that kind of content is not what you think of as a typical media play, but that could be things like frequently asked question forums. That could be, content on how to fix something, how to, you talked about soap, for example. Well, what happens for certain kinds of stains? I mean, there's, how do you know which particular soap works for which kinds of stains on which kind of fabrics or surfaces? And that kind of stuff you do need to look up when you need it,
And I'd say I think that's content. That's content is content, not brands as publishers. But I absolutely agree with everything you said.
Yeah, I think I don't draw the same distinction, brands as publishers, maybe that you do. But yeah, I think it sounds like we're largely on the same page. Maybe it's a semantics thing.
Well, I have to say, I love this topic, and I really do have a lot to say on it. First of all, I think we have to address the giant elephant in the room, which is this is the same company that was responsible for Bud TV, which was a huge investment on the part of the company that went down, in flames. Now, that said, this is actually not a critical comment at all because timing is everything. So what's old is new again. Remember BMW films? So it seems like we've come full circle, and I'm actually very bullish on this. I just want to say, like, as an interesting backdrop, I teach at West Virginia University, and I'm busy grading papers right now. I'm teaching social media strategies. And I'm grading papers, as we speak. I'm not doing it while I'm on the show, but they had to pick a brand that doesn't have a podcast and basically talk about what that podcast might look like. So that was the prerequisite. And I'm looking, and one person has come up with Patagonia, and another one came up with Tampax, and I'm just going through this, going, wait, they don't have a podcast? Why? How in 2021? Does Patagonia not have a podcast? It seems like such a no-brainer in what I would call the streaming era for every single brand to be able to find that middle space and that, that Venn diagram overlap that Melanie was talking about.
Can I push back on every single brand though? So the thing that I struggle with, and yeah, Patagonia should have a podcast. They're a great brand, and people would listen to it.
Did I say every single brand should have a podcast, or every single brand should? Because I just want to say, just to qualify that before you jump in, Augie. I mean, in this, by the way, Corona, and I know this because I happen to have vested the last year of my life in Corona plus streaming. Corona's just come out with a brand studio, so they're trying to also do original content, etc. So it's interesting that what's old is new again. But you would imagine, I mean, to Melanie's point, that brands have a point of view on a bunch of things, and as long as they're not just saying, welcome to the insert brand name here podcast, where or a show where all we do is just shill and hawk and shill and hawk and hawk and shill in that order. There's a tremendous amount that they can do in terms of their access, their assets, leveraging their resources to talk
Education.
about. I mean, so much. Sorry, Augie.
No, that's all right. That's a really good point. The thing that I like to point out to people, though, and nobody here is going to disagree with this, is that we keep talking about more and more and more and more and more content and more channels. We talked about TikTok. We talked about podcasts. We haven't mentioned Clubhouse yet, but in this era, we can't go an hour in marketing without mentioning Clubhouse. And at the end of the day, consumers still have 2 ears and 2 eyes and so many hours of the day. And I do think that whenever we talk about content, I love the way Melanie talked about it, because when people search for something, they need the information they want. But I do think that as marketers, we can get kind of enamored with our own creativity, with the power of our own brands. And I think that there is a finite amount that all of that can resonate with people, that they will make time to listen to podcasts and join Clubhouse and pay attention to brands on TikTok. And I just think we've got to be very objective about that.
Well, and I absolutely do not believe that every brand should be everywhere, right? Every brand probably shouldn't make a Clubhouse play or a TikTok play. It's different, right? You need to be where your audience is. I think that's sort of the spirit of what you're saying too. You don't need to be everywhere. You need to be wherever those 2 eyes and 2 ears of your audience are. That being said, I've seen some incredible folks who have sort of stepped outside of that expectation and seen tremendous success. One of my favorite TikTokers to follow, which by any stretch of the imagination doesn't appear to appeal to the typical TikTok demographic, is a guy who talks exclusively about taxes, like tax loopholes and tax deductions and, when you have to file and different terms and what they mean. But he does it in a very approachable, comical way. And, he's a tax advisor, a tax consultant. So it's got to be doing gangbusters for his business, because he started investing, a lot more time and effort and production value into it. So I think, not every brand for sure, and not every platform for sure. But I do think there's opportunity to be had in being on the right platform for your audience, and also sometimes stepping outside the expectations so you can stand out.
I love that story, and it really does resonate with me in terms of good content strategy, to be focused on your brand and be focused on delivering real service to your audience as opposed to just a marketing message. But one of the things that I realize as a definer between just regular content marketing and brand as a publisher, when you look at the Red Bull model, you're not looking at somebody who's doing a whole bunch of content about sugar water. They're not doing a whole bunch of content about drinking their product. What they're doing is a whole bunch of content about the things that their audience is interested in and making it exciting. And I go back to Augie's example of toothpaste and soap. I mean, why can't that be the opportunity for those brands to create a dating program? I mean, with how hot these dating programs are. I mean, there's this real opportunity to create original content on behalf of the brand. And go ahead.
Except there are dating programs, and they put a lot of money into it, right? And I worked for a alcohol brand that wanted to become the hub of nightlife information in different cities. Makes sense for an alcohol brand, right? failed miserably because they can't possibly compete with the companies that are pouring money into becoming that already. So I think we've got to be cautious. Again, 2 eyes.
Yeah,
2 ears,
I'm not arguing for every brand being a publisher. I'm just saying that when you are a publisher, there are opportunities. And to say that Colgate or Crest don't have enough money to do something like that is almost ludicrous. I mean, it's just like these are big companies that have the budget.
There are a lot of examples of these. I mean, we call them the unsexy companies, right? The people that think they can't create content because they're too boring or too taboo or whatever else. But some of the best examples are exactly what you're just talking about. Johnson & Johnson owns, I forget the name of it, babysomething.com. It's like the biggest resource. They don't talk about their products. Yeah, Baby Center. There you go. I mean, it's like all parenting advice and product reviews, and it's not about the brand at all, but they own that audience. They have the ability to target that audience, to have engagement with that audience, and it's Johnson & Johnson. And then, you make the point about the soap company. I mean, Dove Real Beauty was a massive campaign for several years. They are going up against Victoria's Secret and all these brands that sort of embrace Photoshop and unrealistic body expectations. And Dove is just absolutely has a massive media campaign, fully integrated. It's not about soap at all. It's about confidence and beauty and accepting yourself and self-love. And I mean, it's
I love those
their brand.
examples as campaigns, though, because Dove Real Beauty isn't a thing anymore. BMW Films isn't a thing anymore. A lot of the examples had their moment in time and weren't sustainable. I love Baby Center as an example. It's a great example of something that is closer to brands as publishers and is sustainable. But, and again, maybe I'm just getting too caught up in brands as publishers, but I think a lot of companies have spent a lot of time trying to chase the idea that they can be interesting in social media or they can compete with media sites. And a lot of brands just can't, right? And if you're advising a brand, as we all do, to whether they should spend $1 million on trying to corner the market on being the place where beauty conversation happens, or whether they should spend $1 million on something else, I'm not sure how many of us are going to make that recommendation. So, all I'm saying is content has a place. It is vitally important. It's this whole notion of brands as publishers that just kind of rubs me the wrong way, because I think it encourages the wrong kind of thinking in marketers, not what do my customers need, but what do I want to say?
I mean, listen, well, I have, by the way, I think this is one of the most substantial and meaty conversations that I've had on this show or even other shows on the subject. And so, I really appreciate everything that everyone's saying, including you, Bob. And
thanks. Somebody also ran.
but there are a bunch of things. I'll just throw this out, just a couple of little bites. One is that the mistakes that the brands have made before is trying to create Hollywood style, Emmy award-winning content, and that's not how the world works anymore. And so by overproducing it and over-engineering and engineering it and betting the farm, that's where they set themselves up to fail. And we've just seen how lower the bars and the barriers are to entry, even from a production standpoint. So hopefully they won't make that mistake again to over-engineer it. Point number two, for whatever Bud's doing with the example that we've been chatting about today, brands always come at a slight. Their advantage they have is that they can bring all the stars and they can bring all the star power because they have the budgets. But the disadvantage is that they're still a little too conservative and a little too guarded, and with legal affairs and CorpCom and all of the mitigation, systems and guardrails in place, they tend to maybe not overproduce, but dilute the offering to the point where consumers look at it and go, you know what, this just seems too vanilla, if you will. But the third point I wanted to make, it's not even related to the first two, is that, if this is a reach play, then to me, that's a trap. If you have a base and an audience of loyal, passionate fans, and it doesn't matter what the subject is, it doesn't matter what the category is, you can produce something of value and utility for them. And so I would say aspirationally that every single brand could be and should be able to enter the space or have a place in the space. But the caveat, and it's a huge one, is, those that try and bet the farm or try and win their next Emmy are probably going to end up in the Bud TV graveyard.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just having spent so much time in the content space, I feel a little bit like we're picking the worst possible examples as evidence of why this doesn't work, that there really are so many examples of it working well. It's not for everyone. I don't know anyone who claims it's for everyone. I don't know anyone in the space who recommends, stopping all your other tactics and putting all your eggs in this basket. But I do think publishing content in general is a great strategy for almost every brand. I mean, we need that for search. We need that for discovery. We need it to engage on social. And I think it's just, maybe it's this term, this brands as publishers, that's kind of getting in the way here, because it sounds like, while we might disagree with the term, that nobody seems to argue that brands shouldn't create content. It's really common sense that we'd argue for any tactic, which is it's not the only thing. It shouldn't be the only thing, and experiment and do it strategically. Don't dive into it with both feet and all your budget.
Well, I want to get
objective and logical and right. So annoying.
Well, I'm gonna go to our last topic because we're running out of time and we don't have much time to dwell on this, but I did want to get to it before we end the show. Snap has bought a Berlin startup called Fit Analytics that helps online shoppers find the right size when purchasing clothes online. That was a kind of a redundant statement. But anyway, I'd love all your thoughts on why they would want this company and what it says about the future of the marketing opportunities on the platform. I mean, are you excited about this, Joe? Is this something that makes sense to you?
I've decided to mute myself just for one topic so that the others can jump in.
Okay. Anybody want to weigh in on this? I mean,
I'll say this is interesting in relation to the first topic we talked about today, which is all about targeting. I have an unusual shape. I'm short and stout and difficult to fit. And think about what it could mean to social media with all the pictures we all post of ourselves out there. If the ads we could get wouldn't just be clothing because I'm a man, but it would be clothing in my size that would likely fit me. I think this could be brilliant for him.
I think, to be totally honest, I feel like Snap is struggling for relevance and grasping at straws. I think a lot of the things that have been their calling card and their hallmark have simply become features in other communities with other platforms with much bigger reach and bigger, monthly average users and things. So I think, this probably is a hint at a pivot they're going to be using the camera as a tool in other ways, not just to make silly faces and, send questionable disappearing images anymore.
One of the things that I love about this story the most is that it's good for advertisers and it's good for the community. I mean, just like what Augie said, I mean, people who have a hard time finding something that's going to fit, and the fact that there's vanity sizing in play and everybody's sizing is different depending on the maker of the clothing. I mean, it's really, really difficult to get good sizing. So it makes sense for the consumer. And then from the advertiser standpoint, it makes sense as both a way to equip the people who are your influencers doing promotions for you on the platform, as well as the advertising opportunities that are available. So I really like this play, and I think it's going to make Snap a lot more valuable to both the advertisers and the average consumer. Okay,
I'll unmute myself just briefly to say that it's totally great. I mean, the thing is, if you just look at Instagram, right? Instagram for the most part just plays copycat. In terms of, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. They did it fairly well with stories by ripping off Snapchat. They've done it, I think, in my opinion, fairly poorly with Reels, trying to rip off TikTok. But maybe that's more about the strength and the power, the ascendancy, right, of TikTok versus the kind of plateau of Snapchat. But Snapchat has always been about disposable, and it's always been about filters. And very much camera centric, and it's not a difficult play to understand, and it's a great one, which is people will be able to not only see something but be able to put themselves in that something and then share that something with their followers or their network, and who knows, maybe even be able to incentivize themselves for doing so. Maybe there's some kind of an affiliate or based on the amount of people that end up buying that based on the link, that person might get some kind of discount, etc. So there might even be a commerce play. But this has been the holy grail on social media, even on digital, right? Which is, remember the example, right? I see Jennifer Aniston's sweater on Friends. Wouldn't it be great if I could just click on that or be able to buy that sweater? And we've just not seen that even remotely materialize. And in this case, it could very well come to fruition in Snapchat or through Snapchat with the actual users as opposed to, the celebrities being the spokespeople. So pretty awesome.
Yeah, last week's show dealt with that topic. I think Amazon's cracked the code on that. It's all about fulfillment and having the fulfillment operation, but that's a topic for another day. It's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Melanie Deziel. You can find her at foundationinc.co. Yeah, let's try this again. foundationinc.co. Tell us what's going on in your world, Melanie. You're at Foundation Marketing now. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so I just joined Foundation Marketing as their director of content, working on all things content internally for the company and externally for all of our B2B clients that we do content strategy, creation, and distribution for. So lots of awesome resources, deep dives on some really innovative companies that can inspire your marketing found on our website. So definitely go check that out. And also have to mention my book. So I recently wrote a book called The Content Fuel Framework, How to Generate Unlimited Story Ideas. Hopefully, if coming up with content ideas, if you are sold on the idea of content for your brand, that should be a helpful resource for you.
Is it a book written for the consumer, or rather the creative in the mix, or is it more for the marketing manager or somebody who's trying to get into the content space?
So I would say it's both. So the target audience really is marketers and creators. It's both the folks who are creators and kind of want an extra boost or to think in a different way, and it's for folks that typically wouldn't consider themselves creative. So this might be sales folks or HR, whoever it may be, who still needs to find compelling ways to share a message internally and externally, and needs a little bit of guidance on how they might do that.
That sounds fantastic. So yeah, definitely check that out. I guess they can find it on Amazon. Is that the best place to send them?
Absolutely, yeah. And the book also has a website, contentfuelframework.com. So if that's easier for you to remember, contentfuelframework.com. There's all kinds of helpful links, more about the book, reviews, things like that. You could check it out and see if it makes sense for you. Wonderful,
wonderful. Now, next up, we have Joseph Jaffe. You can find him at a show called Corona TV, which is coronatv.show. Tell us what's going on in your world, Joe. What would you like to promote?
There's actually a lot going on, starting with the fact that tomorrow on the show, although, I'm sure people it doesn't matter, because by the time people are listening to this, whenever they do, they can always go back and watch the show again. But I have Tom Peters on my show. And, I remember reading In Search of Excellence way back when, what a role he's played and how influential he's been in just so many people's lives. So you could probably... most of the links that you should care about, including anything I'm about to say, you can find on my Linktree, which is basically linktree.com/JaffeJuice. The two other things, I'm delivering a masterclass for the Association of National Advertisers on social audio, drop-in audio /Clubhouse. And that's on Tuesday and the 23rd. And you can register for that if you're listening to it before. But even if afterwards, contact me and I'll make sure you get a link to that, to the video, because I'm recording it. And then the final thing is, there really is quite a bit going on, is a few weeks ago, I launched my first branded coin. I launched a cryptocurrency called the Jaffe coin. And I'm so excited about the future of creator monetization, and I just love the fact that I have a coin called the Jaffe coin. And so my little offer to any BeanCast listeners, because we've been together for years now, I've been here since since the beginning, which is, if you buy a Jaffe coin and you send me one Jaffe coin, I will send you back 3. So how about that? That is an offer which says you register on rally.io, you send me a Jaffe coin, and I will send you back 3. And if you are subscribed to Corona TV, I'll send you back 5. And all you have to do when you send me that Jaffe coin is just indicate in the box BeanCast, and I will do the rest. So that's my way of thanking you for supporting me over the years, but in particular for supporting the BeanCast.
How many Jaffe coins does it take to buy a cup of coffee? That's what I want to know, because it's just like, if I can buy coffee, I'm totally on board.
I will buy you a cup of coffee any day of the week, any day of the year. You do not need Jaffe coins for that, my friend.
Awesome to know. Well, last but not least, we have Augie Ray. You can find him at Gartner.com. That's the place where he is the head of the customer experience analyst portion of things. I'm not really sure how to describe that, Augie, but you can also read a lot of his writing. I mean, this man writes more than anybody I know. I mean, it's just like you could probably fill 10 books with the amount of stuff that he's written over the years. And you can find a lot of his deep thinking about marketing and customer experience over at blogs. I think it's blog.gartner.com. Is that how you get there?
It is easier just to search for Augie Ray Gartner blog, but I've really got nothing to promote, especially other than the usual hard work that I and my peers do covering customer experience over at Gartner. And so I'll be brief and just say that if you're interested in customer experience topics such as how to measure it and what's the ROI and what are the best practices, please go ahead and search for Gartner Customer Experience, and you'll find blog posts and some free resources that will be very interesting.
That sounds great, and I definitely recommend anything that Augie writes, except his political rants. You don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
I've been doing less of those, Bob.
As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, Joe, the fair of this week is a really interesting play because it's more about, I should probably go to Augie on this, but customer experience. You buy a pizza at Pizza Hut, you have an AR, trigger on the top of the pizza box, and suddenly you can play a Pac-Man game on your cell phone or your mobile phone while you're eating your pizza. I think this is a really brilliant move, a really nice use of AR, and it's not necessarily original. We've seen it done on wine. We've seen it done in a number of different products, but I do love that they thought about the situation that people find themselves in quarantine. If you're going to order a pizza, you need a little entertainment that goes along with it.
I agree. And I think that, and this is where I'm going to show a little bit of forgetfulness or ignorance, or maybe prove a different point. But I have a feeling Domino's has been the innovative brand in this space where they've done some cool stuff, including turning your actual pizza box into a projector. And so in this particular case, Pizza Hut doing something innovative with their box, if it wasn't Pizza Hut being the innovative one, this is almost a kind of anything you can do, we can do better, which is fair. This is the fair. But I totally agree with you. I think it's kind of, it's also cool because in a way it's kind of pizza in a movie or pizza in a game, or it's just building this into a little bit more of a transaction. So, no criticism otherwise, except for the fact that I think it would be interesting. There is that little backstory, which has been the more innovative player in this space. Has it been Pizza Hut or Domino's? But it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, the fail for this week goes to Facebook. Augie, Facebook can easily ban ads featuring breasts, even cartoon breasts, even nursing mother's breasts, but still manages to allow people smuggling ads and all the other stuff that goes on in that platform. I mean, it's just mind-numbing to me that in the same week we see all these stories about ads featuring women's breasts being banned on the platform. You hear about the fact that they're letting ads get through that show people trying to smuggle people across borders. It's just so mind-boggling, mind-numbing to me. What do you think?
I agree. What else needs to be said? Mark Zuckerberg has been made $100 billionaire over thanks to Facebook, and the idea that they can't solve for better policing is pretty annoying. I gave up Facebook. We talked about it earlier. Many people have. I gave up Facebook about 15, 16 months ago and got drawn back into it because of COVID. And as we come out of COVID, I'm beginning to think again of giving it back up, because I really have a hard time thinking about giving as much attention and time and ad revenue to Facebook as I do when it can't take any of this sort of thing very seriously.
Yeah, it is problematic. I have a whole different strategy. I don't quit Facebook. I just don't look at it. So.
I just wanted to add that I did Google it, and actually it is Pizza Hut that turned the box into a movie projector. So it seems like this is very consistent with the Pizza Hut leaning into innovation, emerging tech, etc.
But think of what it means that you thought it was Domino's, because we've come to associate innovation in the pizza space with Domino's so much that you remembered Pizza Hut's campaign.
Yeah, but that's
associated with its competitor.
But that's just I'm just a cranky. I'm just a cranky aging marketing guy. So just screw. Who cares about what I think? I wanted to add something to this topic as well, which is it's so ridiculous. I mean, for the longest time, I spent my first year with Corona TV just trying to get it right, the formula. Now I'm trying to start to promote some of the episodes. Every single time I try and promote an episode of Corona TV, I keep on getting my ads disapproved. Why? Because I'm trying to sell beer to underage consumers, and I'm trying to profit and exploit what's called sensitive events, which is tragic events, etc. And at first I was like, what? How is this happening? I'm not trying to do either of those things. And then I was like, the name Corona. Great. So, I mean, it seems like the artificial intelligence, algorithms are more artificial and less intelligent.
Yeah, it's just... Go ahead. My
take on this is just generally that, there never seems to be any issue regulating women's bodies on these platforms. It's just the crimes that they have trouble honing in on.
Good point. That's a very succinct way to kind of wrap up that topic. Well, the foul for this week, I'm going to go to Melanie on this one. Peacock, the streaming service from NBC, is pricing its ad inventory at primetime rates. Now, on the surface, this is just like, you go, girl. If you want to do this, if you want to try to make more money, go for it, Linda. I mean, it's just like it makes a lot of sense. But, it just seems kind of living in a fantasy world, considering what's going on with broadcast right now and how streaming services are not necessarily, the best place to run advertising as of yet. So what do you think about this move? I mean, it's just like, it's good for them. I mean, if they can get it, go for it. But it seems like it's completely off base and not really living in reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm on board with your general opinion here, is that, that seems like they're asking quite a bit. I guess the market will tell them whether they are asking too much or not. But I also think just from an optics standpoint, I mean, Quibi, it's been, the blood of Quibi is still on our hands, not yet dried, and so I don't think that buyer confidence in these kinds of platforms, particularly new ones, is very high. So I think it's a bold move, if nothing else, just from an optics standpoint, that I'm not sure that I'd be going around asking for that on such a new platform when we've seen so many very public failures of the very same as of late.
Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag #FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcasts listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like it's like you know what I mean? Like it's like totally like that. It's like I don't know. Like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of. It just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.